All right, good morning, everybody. It's so great to be here with you all today, and thank you for joining. It's really cool for me to be here. The first time I ever came to the Moscone Center, I was 16, and I drove myself all the way down to San Francisco, 3 hours from where I grew up in Northern California, for that first Macworld Expo where they launched those colorful iMacs. So it's really cool to be back here. I always love coming to the RSA conference every year. But one of the things I love about San Francisco is just the spirit of innovation that runs through this city. And today, we're really going to talk about the future. And the future may sound like science fiction, but I kind of feel like we're living in it. I mean, how many of you have seen those Waymo cars driving around outside? Yeah. I mean, they're crazy, right? You see these cars with no drivers just navigating the streets. I took my first Waymo ride last week, and I really felt like I was living in the future. It was like I was, in iRobot or Minority Report or something, where the car just drove me around, and I got to set the music, and it was nuts. So I tell that story just to kind of set the stage of today. I really want to talk about the future and where we're headed, because I think it's important for us all as an industry to think big and to think about how can we fundamentally change the things that we've all struggled with. So the agenda for today is talk to kind of the current state of the SOC, maybe talk through kind of the long term, what does the SOC of the future look like? And then maybe talk through some ways that we can actually evolve our SOCs to hopefully make that future a reality. So I love this GIF, right, of the guy pushing up the boulder. As soon as he makes progress, he falls back down, right? It's based on that Greek story of Sisyphus, right? If I don't know if you guys, the Sisyphean challenge, where as soon as he gets to the top, it rolls back down and he has to start over. This to me really represents what cybersecurity professionals suffer with every day, right? As soon as you think you're making progress, you fall back down, you have to start over. We have to monitor our SOCs 24/7. We have to deal with new threats, new technologies, and as soon as we think we're getting a handle on those things, well, guess what? Something new comes along, something else happens. We've heard for years, we're under-resourced and overloaded. We don't have enough people in this industry. Alert fatigue continues to grow. We need more tools, we need more budget, right? It's a hard job. If any of you guys, how many in here actually work in a SOC or work with the SOC? Okay, good. So a lot of practitioners. I look forward to talking to you all after this. So you guys probably have made that face before, in this image. So when I look at the SOC, I really think it boils down to being a data problem. And why is it a data problem, right? We really have too much of it, but we also don't have enough, right? And it's that weird paradox of we need to capture more data, but we have way more data that we can handle already. We have way too much data spread in lots of different systems and across lots of different tools. And the data's there for us to be able to find and detect and do all the things we need to do for our job. But making sense of that data is something that humans frankly aren't that good at. Humans aren't good at processing billions or trillions of data points to be able to make sense of it, right? So I really think we need to think about, as we evolve the SOC, how do we think about how we bring that data together in kind of meaningful ways? I'm a little bit different in my background than maybe a lot of you in the room. I have a degree in political science, and I actually went to business school. And it's interesting because when we think about the SOC, that letter O, operations, right? We call it security operations, but how many of us are actually treating our security operations program in the way that business school thinks about it? In business school, they make you take a class called operations management, and it's all about finding the bottlenecks, fixing those bottlenecks, and moving on to the next one, right? And I remember my operations teacher when I was in business school, he would optimize every single part of his day, from the number of steps it took to go to his office to his drive to work. He would find the bottlenecks on his drive and remove it. How many right-hand turns can I make on red? How many stop signs can I avoid? What are the stoplights that take a long time? And it got me thinking about the SOC, right? And in the SOC, are we really measuring our operations? Are we finding those bottlenecks, right? Are we measuring the time that it takes to triage and respond to an alert? Are we measuring the time that it takes us to hunt and investigate, to respond, to remediate? Are we even doing any proactive risk management? Hopefully, but are we even doing anything proactive, or do we not even have time for that? And are we actually measuring that stuff? And are we finding the bottlenecks and trying to fix it, right? And I think as an industry, we need to get better at thinking about kind of that business impact of the operations side of the SOC. of how can we find those bottlenecks, how can we observe our team, how can we measure. And we actually in business school would do those exercises, right, where we'd have a process where like you'd have to make a cut and you'd pass it down the line, right, and we'd time each of those processes and we'd measure them, we'd measure across different people. And then we would find those bottlenecks and then find ways to optimize that process. And I think if we as an industry can figure out how to leverage technology, how we can measure that to find the bottlenecks and fix those, hopefully we can make that frustrating day in the life of a security analyst something much better. So, the SOC of today, obviously we've gone through some evolution over the years, right? I think, like most programs, they're built around people, technology, and processes, or people, process, and technology, right? So, we have our security analysts, our incident responders. Hopefully you have some threat hunters. You obviously have people who manage that. And you have a whole stack of technology, right? Obviously there's a lot more than this in the technology stack. I think the average enterprise uses, something like 30 to 50 different tools across their security team. But these are the big ones, right? SIEM, SOAR, you probably have an EDR, XDR, you probably have threat intel, you have some sort of system to manage events, manage cases. And then you've built out a lot of processes, right? You have hopefully playbooks for your team. You have IR procedures documented. Hopefully you have a process that if a breach happens, who do I contact, who do I go through? Hopefully you've run some simulations. You obviously have all your compliance frameworks. And you bring all this together and that's kind of your SOC, right? And for a lot of people, some people do this in-house, some people outsource this, but I think it's that kind of constant swing of I don't have enough people, I don't have enough resources, we're drowning in alerts, et cetera. And this is something that really frustrates me. I've been on the vendor side for the majority of my career, 20 plus years. And our marketing teams at many different companies always throw up that problem statement slide, which I know customers love seeing. Let me tell you about your problems, right? Hopefully they're already experts on their problems. But that slide that every vendor throws up there is the same slide we've been shown for 10, 15 years at this point, right? Our systems are disconnected. They're slow. I don't have all the visibility I need. I have too many alerts. It's too expensive. It's too complex to manage. All of these problems just continue to persist. And that, is frustrating as an industry because we've thrown lots of technology at it. We raise our budgets every year. And are we really actually getting better at, reducing mean time to detect, mean time to respond? Are we really getting better at fixing those bottlenecks and fundamentally improving the SOC? Or are we actually making the problem worse? Because it actually seems like the problem's gotten worse. I think alert fatigue's worse today than it's ever been, but we had all these technologies that were supposed to solve this, right? But guess what? When you start adding anomaly and behavioral and AI and you have all this, you have even more noise right now. As you start talking about cloud and you start talking about mobile devices, the amount of data is just growing, more and more every day. So the problems are actually getting worse. So we as vendors have built a lot of technology. You guys have spent a lot of money implementing that technology. And are we really seeing that drastic improvement? Hopefully we see some incremental improvement, but are we seeing that massive, improvement as an industry? And that's something, that I think underscores everything I really want to talk about today is how can we think about the future of the SOC to make some major impacts on improving, that life of the analyst. So, the SIEM, this was supposed to solve it, right? Oh man, we got these great systems where we can bring all alerts together and we'll correlate and have detection rules and, SIEM's gonna solve it all for us, right? How many people feel like their SIEM has solved everything that it promised? Okay, I see 0 hands, right? The SIEM is probably the most expensive investment that any security team makes, and it's probably one of the most frustrating tools that we all have in our arsenals, right? Because it's not easy, right? It's really hard to ingest a bunch of data, to normalize that data. It's really hard to stay on top of those data pipelines. It's really hard to be able to write detection rules and stay on top of the latest things across a disparate data source. And you're once again, it's just a platform that you're dealing with more alert fatigue because now I have more alerts, feeding into that system that I have to, prioritize, investigate, respond to in a very, inefficient process. The data volumes have grown so exponentially too that I think a lot of the SIEMs out there weren't architected for the world that we live in today. Like they were architected for the world of, maybe a couple of terabytes of data was big enterprises SIEM volume. I mean, we're talking for a large company petabytes of data now per day that's being generated, right? And so the SIEMs don't necessarily, scale to that amount of data, and obviously our budgets aren't scaling to keep up to date with that. SIEMs, there's huge challenges with, like I said, with integrating into our stacks, integrating into our tool sets, normalizing data. and then delivering all that detection content, right? So I think SIEM largely has failed to deliver on its promise, right? We had a lot of promise over the years, and every SIEM vendor, next-gen SIEM and everything else, right? We have all these promises, but I don't know if it's really solved it yet. So SOAR came along, right? Security Orchestration, Automation, Response. Automation, yeah, this is going to save us a lot of time. This is going to be meaningful. And I think for a lot of teams who've embraced automation, it has had an impact, probably more than SIEM has, right? Because we can automate those repeatable processes. But I think a lot of the SOAR vendors, as people started actually deploying these things, is they realized there was a lot of cost. There was a lot of operational overhead to actually operate and run these things. You had to constantly update playbooks as APIs changed, as workflows changed, and they became outdated very quickly. You needed new skill sets on your team to write Python and other stuff like that, right? And so the actual deployment, became a challenge. And I think too, automation obviously I think has huge opportunities in security operations, but I think security practitioners are a little, gun shy of automation, right? Because we've all seen false positives. And what if a false positive, quarantines something and we automate some sort of response and take out our company? That's not so great, right? And especially as these systems, as these tools change, there's a lot of concern there. So, I think SOAR, definitely has room for improvement as well. So these are the tools and kind of the primary piece of the SOC that, I think have kind of failed to deliver on its full promise. We've only seen that incremental value. So, obviously, it wouldn't be a security conference in 2025 if we didn't talk about AI. But I really see AI as a true catalyst for change. And I really see this as the next industrial revolution. And with all industrial revolutions, you see inefficiencies, processes, back that operations, improved, right? And using machines to improve those processes and improve those bottlenecks and eliminate those bottlenecks. And so how as an industry can we use AI to basically drive that forward? So, just to kind of think, sci-fi now, and I always think, did sci-fi predict the future, or did sci-fi give us something to build and go aim for, right? I always think through that, like, was a flying car, did somebody come up with that and they predicted the future, or did we see a flying car and now the human brain wants to figure out how we build flying cars because that looks freaking cool, right? Or how do we build an autonomous car that drives me around the streets of San Francisco with no one in the front seat? I think that there's huge opportunity here for us to think about, like, well, in a perfect world, like, what would the SOC look like, right? And I always like Minority Report, where it's like you had the predictive, precogs, and he could like use his hands and dig through information really quickly, and it was like, are we going to get there as an industry? Are we going to get to where, we're going to have that sort of technology where we can, have the humans know everything that's going on and be able to react very quickly to it, right? So I think agentic AI obviously is going to be a big part of our future, and I'll talk more about what that means, but imagine a world where a lot of those routine tasks that take hours today, imagine that those can be automated and we have AI that can act like a tier 1 or a tier 2 analyst that has been trained and has the same skills, but to do it faster and more efficiently, that can triage our alerts, that can respond to the alerts, that can do those investigations and reach out to all the other tools and data that we have to be able to add that context and bring that together, and even recommend an automated response, right? That's really the promise of agentic AI, is to act like a human, right? And the whole term AI I think has been way overused in our industry, right? I think for the last decade, people really meant machine learning, but marketing loves the term AI because it's cool and sci-fi and futuristic. I think we're actually getting to the point that AI is actually a term that I think we can actually start using, right? We're getting much more into artificial intelligence beyond just, building these kind of machine learning models. So I think a world where, majority of our threats can be triaged, a majority of our threats can be, auto-investigated, a recommendation can be made, and a response can be automated. Like, I don't think that that's that far in the future. And I think that there's huge potential here to massively change the way that we operates our SOCs. Augmented and virtual reality. This is something that I don't hear as much from vendors out there, but we really need to innovate the presentation layer in security. And I think there's huge opportunities with augmented virtual reality. And actually, my last company, we built actually some augmented virtual reality views of the network. So imagine sitting around a war room table and seeing your network rise from the table with augmented reality glasses. And imagine being able to visualize and see the threats and see the attacks and be able to mitigate in a visual way. Because while humans aren't great at processing trillions of data points, they're visual learners, right? Like when you drive to work in the morning, your brain's processing millions of data points. You don't even realize it because visually we can take in a lot of information. So can we use the improvements and the advances we've seen in augmented and virtual reality, and how do we bring those to the SOC? How can we allow our teams to visualize their data and present this data in a way that humans can interact with it in much better and more friendly ways? And like I said, I actually built some of this tech at my previous company 5 years ago, right? So like, this sounds like the future, and maybe we were ahead of our time. We probably were. We got acquired by Verizon, so they own that tech now. But I really think that there's huge opportunities for us to change the way that our SOC visualizes and views data. Threat hunting, right? Hopefully all of you, how many of you have threat hunting programs in your organizations? Okay. See, not as many hands that I'd hope, right? And that's probably because for most SOCs, we're so reactive. We're responding to the alerts, responding to all the noise, responding to all the things. And we've been doing that for 10 years, and vendors have been telling us about that for 10 years, and we continue to do that because we actually have more alerts than we've ever had before, right? So proactive hunting to me is, I think in the future, when threats become known, when 0 days become out there, when the newest threat research gets posted, why can't AI grab that, automatically hunt through potentially a year or more of my data, do all that hunting for me, and when I come in the morning, I'm not there waiting for my boss to say, hey, I saw this thing on the news, are we impacted? Which I think that just ruins probably every SOC engineer's day, right? Hey, are we impacted by this? Because that's such a challenging task. Are we impacted by this? What does that mean for somebody? They have to go research. They have to learn, what am I actually hunting for? They have to build that hypothesis. They have to build a query, probably across multiple different tools. They have to potentially dig through thousands of events that might come back. They then have to link those things together manually, and they have to write up a report. And we're talking potentially days or even weeks for like a single hunt, right? What if we could just come in the morning and before your boss even asks, your console or your AI says, hey, these are the latest things today. These are the latest hypotheses that I have. I already went out and hunted, and you're good. What a great way to start our day, right? Where you can walk in, and you already know you're good against that 0 day. You already know that it's not in your environment, and you can start being proactive to prevent it from getting in your environment because you know you're not already impacted. So this is where I think we can get to a future with our SOC that, why can't that be automated? Why can't that be proactive? Why do we need to spend humans' time hunting for everything, especially the known, right? Let's have the humans start thinking about the unknown, the things that we don't know about yet. And those are where we can put our resources. I think the SOC of the future is really going to embrace a zero trust architecture. Now, this is a little bit of a buzzword, and nobody sells zero trust. It's not a product, right? But it's an architecture, right? It's a way of thinking. And I think with AI and automation, it's going to really bring in the future of the SOC being able to really implement a zero trust architecture in a meaningful way, right? Because if we can automate and we can use AI to really restrict and allow access only when needed to specific resources, or we can revoke access in an automated way, and we can tie that back to identities and applications and everything within our environments. I think that we're going to see a lot of technologies develop that are really going to enable the zero trust architecture and allow the SOC to actually take a very quick response action to essentially quarantine a device and remove access from a device. Because if we have all these controls in place tied to a user or a system, we should be able to very quickly kick off those controls to be able to isolate that device and prevent spread. And if we can detect those things in an automated way, we can detect those things faster, and we can cut the head off the snake, so to speak, and respond to that. And I think our SOCs really need to evolve specifically around cloud, right? I don't see enough organizations building a cloud-dedicated SOC. So, to me, the cloud is a different animal, right? The threats are somewhat different, but the systems and tooling is different, and it's a much more dynamic environment, right? Cloud deployments are spinning up new cloud workloads, many, many times per day, and new systems and new policies, and stuff's changing so fast that you really need, I think, people in your SOC who speak the cloud language, who are cloud native, who understand cloud deployments. And so I'd encourage all of you, as you think about what does my SOC of the future look like, to start thinking about how we build, a SOC for the cloud, right? And I think my next kind of SOC of the future is, I think the future is going to be federated. So many vendors right now, SentinelOne where I work included, right? We talk about our data platform and being the data lake, right? And I love using the analogy. I live in Minnesota, and we have 10,000 lakes, right? It's on all our license plates, and we do have Lake Superior, which is massive and big, but we have 9,999 other lakes as well, right? And I think the reality for most organizations is we're not going to get to the point that all our data lives in one place. It's just, it's not a reality, right? Because not all data is alike, right? There's event data, there's, data that might be living in a database or be changed, that's more, changeable or not immutable. And so we really need our SOCs to be able to access all of the data wherever it lives, right? The days of having to funnel and back channel all of our data to a central place like a SIEM to be able to make sense of it, that does make sense for certain types of data, maybe like alerts and stuff too, but there's going to be a lot of contextual data, a lot of data we might threat hunt around that we can't really afford to have to build all these data pipelines and send all this data where it lives. And can we get to a place where our tools can work together, right? That wherever the data lives, we should be able to access that data, make sense of that data, and use that data in an automated way, and have AI be able to access that data as well. So I really think we need to think about the future as being federated, right? And we need to start asking our vendors to build platforms that are open and can work with the other tools, because the story of telling our customers that, hey, the world would be great if you just send all the data to us, that's a really hard discussion to have for most people. So I talked about where I kind of see the SOC headed, but this is going to be an evolution, right? We've all made investments, we have limited budgets, we have limited people, we have limited time. And so how can we start kind of evolving towards that vision, right? How can we start thinking about how we get there? Let's build that roadmap. So there's been a lot of articles out there that say the autonomous SOC is a pipe dream, right? The myth of the fully autonomous SOC. There'll never be an autonomous SOC. It's not the right problem to solve. And I, fundamentally disagree with this, right? Because I think it comes back to how you define an autonomous SOC. I drove in that Waymo last night. That was an autonomous car, right? Now, was it fully autonomous? Yes, but did I have some control? Absolutely. I could hit a button and have it stop and pull over, right? And I could get out. I could hit a button and have a human get on who could help me if I run into issues, right? So while that is an autonomous experience, it didn't completely eliminate the human, right? And that's where I think when we think about the autonomous SOC, it's about how do we, build something where we can make the pieces of the process that are inefficient for humans, how can we make those autonomous? And how can we put the humans in position to use their unique reasoning? So when I think about the SOC and the processes that we could try to make autonomous, or we could leverage AI, these are some of the big areas, right? Monitoring. I think this is a huge area for AI, right? Because why do we want humans to have to go look at systems constantly and look at all the flashy buttons and stuff as well? When, hey, why can't we have AI monitor? Why can't we have AI look at, is this normal? Is this how it should be operating? Do I see it, operating in different ways? What about collecting evidence? Like I said, if the future's federated, how do we have AI actually go out to all those different disparate sources, the 30 to 50 different tools that an organization might have, and collect that evidence? That seems like a great autonomous use of AI. Investigating threats, same, right? If you wrote a playbook that you give to your tier 1 and tier 2 SOC analysts to go investigate a threat, why can't we have AI go do that, right? I mean, we already have the playbook. Why can't we train it on how to go do that and have it be able to go in our environments and go do that initial investigation? Triage, this is another great example. Why can't we use the power of AI, the power of machine learning, to help us prioritize alerts? because it can pull in additional context, it can pull in the priority, it can use things like, similarity analysis to look at things that it's seen in the past to say, was this a true positive or false positive in the past? And can we use that to help prioritize based on criticality of assets? These are things AI is actually really good at. Response and remediation too. I mean, this really goes hand in hand, I think, with automation, and I really see automation and AI, needing to be tightly linked here. Or reporting, right? Why are we spending a lot of time having to create a lot of these manual reports for our bosses when, AI is actually quite good at taking a lot of data and summarizing it nicely for your boss, right? And can do that in seconds. So there's a lot within the SOC that I truly think that we can automate, and we can, get to that kind of idea of autonomous. So really the potential of an autonomous SOC, right, is that our environments are, more complex than ever, right? With endpoints and networks and cloud and, IoT and OT and all this stuff, right? We just don't have the people, the time, the budget to do these things all manually anymore, right? We just don't, right? I really think there's opportunities for AI, for automation, to really drastically reduce the time that it takes to detect, investigate, respond, hunt with threats, right? And this is really, I think, the promise to our industry, right? And as an industry, we have to execute on this, right? Because I think we've all been bit by the over promises of things like SIEM and SOAR, right? And I hope that AI doesn't fall into those same buckets. But there's huge opportunity for us, I think, to automate and make autonomous, many pieces of the SOC to free up our humans to focus on those things that really matter. So if I think about how we evolve towards that, right? We kind of talk about these 4 levels of getting to an autonomous SOC, right? So level 0 is where everything's manual, right? You have a single source of detection logic. It's very manual to investigate, respond. That's where, hopefully most organizations have moved beyond that, but that's probably where most were, 15 years ago, right? Level 1 is kind of the next level, right? Where, you've at least have some correlation. You're writing some detection rules. You may have some sort of expert system or a SOAR, to be able to pull those things together. I'll call this kind of the legacy SIEM, step. Level 2 is where you see a lot of vendors headed today, right, with their next-gen SIEM. I hate next-gen, right? And I hate calling next-gen SIEM something, too. It kind of feels to me like calling a car a next-gen horse and carriage, right? It's like something that didn't work. We're still calling it SIEM. But unfortunately, we got to stick with SIEM because it's an industry term and it's a compliance requirement and everyone has budget for it, right? So, but the kind of next-gen SIEM, right, is the AI-assisted, right? And this is where we're seeing a lot of technologies come up with their kind of chat bots, right, where it's helping make it easier to query and ask questions, of your environment. But I think kind of where we're headed next is this partial autonomy, right, which I talked about of, this kind of auto triage, auto investigation. A human comes in, sees the summary, sees the prioritization, checks the work of the AI, right, because AI is not 100% accurate. So our AI models need to be very, prescriptive and show their work. But a human hopefully can come in there and say, I agree with that conclusion. Now let's go kick off, the response workflows across my various different tools. And that's, I think, where we as an industry, and at SentinelOne, something we think a lot about is, kind of that partial autonomy. But, I think there's a level above that, and this is where we kind of get to that fully autonomous SOC, which once again doesn't remove humans, but gets into the point of, agentic, right, where we can get AI to act like those tier 1 and tier 2 analysts that can act like our, threat hunters and can be trained to operate like a human within our environment. So I think, that we're on this kind of journey, this natural evolution. Definitely think about your organization, where you might be on this journey. But I definitely think there's a path towards that. So, the kind of the key components of autonomous SOC, right? I think we're going to need to get to that AI SIEM place, right, which really brings together the right data platform, automation, and automation in a way that is no code, kind of low lift automation, and we get to the point of actually having agentic AI, right? I think in terms of threat intel, right, like why are we relying on humans to create these feeds for us that then they ship to us? And by the time we get it, it's pretty stale, right? Because threat intel ages out so quickly right now. But in the future, I think we're going to have AI created threat intel, right? Where why can't it look across all of our, threats and things that we've had and automatically curate those IOCs and look for those things? And why can't we have more information sharing across our ISACs and our, variety of different things as well? I think the people are going to change too, right? We're going to need more, AI, ML experts, data scientists in our SOCs, on our security teams, right? We're going to need people who can actually build models, right? And so I think we're going to need to evolve our workforce to move beyond, that tier 1, tier 2 analyst, because hopefully we have AI and automation doing that stuff, and figuring out how we can train people to help feed into that model, help train that model, and free up our people to be kind of those level 3, security analysts within the environment. I think the future is going to be cloud, as I mentioned too, right? We're going to need specific analysts who have cloud expertise and can use cloud tools. And I think when it comes to process, we're going to be automated, right? We need to be more proactive, auto triage, auto investigation, those sorts of playbooks. So I think the other challenge for SOC transformation is, there's a lot of platforms out there. But when you think about how, what platforms do I want in the future, these are some things that I would encourage you to think about. And one is scale. Let's not, standardize on platforms that can't scale into those petabytes of data per day, right? We really need these platforms that can scale with us in the future, that have architectures that can auto-scale as data volumes even, change within our own organizations, and aren't going to lock us into, we don't have money to pay for that data, we have to drop that data, et cetera. I think we really need to build platforms that are open and federated, right? When you hear a lot of vendors talking to you about their platform, right? Ask yourself, is this platform open, or do I have to buy everything from that vendor? Do I have to be locked into that vendor for every tool? Because, look, I want best of breed, and even if that vendor provided best of breed tools, the switching cost to go to everything from a single vendor is very high. And we've all seen, vendors have mishaps too, and so I think, having some diversification of vendors as well, so that you don't, take out your entire network or miss something because all the threat intel comes from a single vendor. I think we really need to build these open and federated platforms, right? Where data can be accessed wherever it lives, where data, even from competitive products, needs to be able to be integrated, needs to be able to, flow between it. Because at the end of the day, on the vendor community, right, we're competing with each other, but we're also on the same side, right? We're trying to help you defend your organizations from attacks. And so please encourage all of your vendors to take this mindset too, right? Of look, I know they're a competitor, but I need you to work with them because here's the problem I need to solve. And I think that's going to be really critical. Cost is another huge one, right? There's a lot of economic uncertainty right now, right? And budgets are not going up. But when you walk that show floor, there's probably 50 new technologies that are interesting to you or that you'd love to bring into your organization, right? And to really evolve the SOC, it's going to take some money, it's going to take some time, right? But I think there's going to be some payback there. But as we think about the tools and the platforms that we consolidate on, I think cost is going to be a huge driver there, and something you need to look at. I think performance is another huge one, right? We talk about AI and automation, but if it takes us 10 minutes for the data to show up before it can be automated or before AI can do anything with it, we've kind of already missed it, right? And I think that's one of the challenges with SIEM and SOAR, right? Is your tools generate an alert, they send it off to the SIEM has to index and process it, and then maybe the SOAR kicks off, but by then the attack could already be done, right? And now you're just doing a response versus actually preventing or stopping the attack. So performance is really critical of your system. I think our systems are going to have to be cloud native, right? To get that performance, to get that scale, to get that cost, we're going to have to leverage the shared compute power of the cloud, right? And this can't just be putting an on-prem architecture in the cloud. It needs to be a cloud native platform that actually gets cheaper, faster, more scalable, as the system grows. And we need to keep our data for longer periods of time, right? We're having to sacrifice very valuable data because we can't afford to keep it for long enough time periods, right? And so our platforms in the future really need to enable us to keep the data, the important data, for as long as we can. Speed, as I talked about, right? We need data to be available. We need those alerts to be available in seconds, right? We need to be able to write a query, or we need AI to write a query that returns in seconds, right? And we need to be able to detect or respond in a minute, right? There was another competitor out there who talked about their 11060 a number of years ago, right? And that's just too long, right? We're in the world of like attacks execute in seconds, and if we're not, having that, second time to detect, to be able to find and to be able to detect and respond, like we're losing the battle, right? And attackers are using a lot of automation right now, and even AI, to be able to, circumvent our technologies, right? If we're still living in that responsive world where oh, I saw that alert, it happened 10 minutes ago, now I need to go do something about it, like we've already lost, right? So speed is critical as you think about the future. I think we're all in this, probably all of you are still in the, adapting Gen AI, and, I think Gen AI has a range of value for sure. But, Gen AI is really about assisting me with my work. You ask it to do something, it'll go, build the query, it'll, write an analysis, it'll help you with your job. But agentic AI is actually doing the work for you, right? And so this is where it might actually act like, an analyst and actually go do that investigation, do that run book, do that threat hunt in an automated way, right? Without a human having to go tell it to do it, right? And that's the challenge with generative AI is it's great and super powerful, but it still requires, most of them, a human to go ask the question, right? And to find the time to ask the question, right? Even though it'll be much faster at getting the results, it still has that human in the loop. So we're going to definitely see that transition. And I mentioned before, but we have to evolve our visualizations. Like the amount of times I've walked into a SOC and seen a bunch of pie charts on a giant wall of televisions, I'm just like, what does that pie chart tell you? If that pie chart changes from 19% to 20%, what does that mean? What do you go do? Nothing? I don't know. If that line graph changes, like, what does that even mean? Like, we throw a bunch of pretty colors up there, and I'm not trying to call it any vendors, because every vendor is kind of bad at visualization of data, right? But pie charts and line graphs and stuff, like, and numbers, right? This isn't telling us what we need to do or how should we respond or what's the most important things. It's a bunch of colors for, our executives to come in and look at all the cool things we're doing. Right? So I think we really need to think about how do we evolve that presentation layer, as an industry. Obviously, using AI to improve our detections. A lot of this is happening today. Behavioral-based detections, anomaly-based detections. Doing automated correlations. But I think we can get to the point that AI can help us be more predictive, right? Can help us be more real-time and be faster. And use the generative AI and the LLMs and stuff to really take that to the next level. So I see huge benefits in terms of us being able to make sense of that noise using AI to be able to find those things that we have a lot of trouble with detecting today. And then, like I said, proactive, right? We need to think about how we evolve our SOCs to have more automated scanning, right? Why can't we automatically scan for prior vulnerabilities? Why can't we automatically maybe even simulate an attack to exploit those vulnerabilities, right? Why do we need to rely on our annual pen test for that? I talked about the automated hunting, right? How do we use AI to automatically go hunt for the newest things that are out there, get fed the latest threat intel of the day? How can we get to automated patching, right? Or at least a workflow that the person who owns the system can be told automatically. Hey, this is your tool, this is your application, you're the last one who patched it, you have a vulnerability that we automatically discovered, go patch that now, and they could, click a button and whenever they're ready and hopefully automate that patching process, right? How can we get to that, right? Because this is a losing battle. There's, new vulnerabilities every single day, and, we can't seem to stay ahead of them, right? And obviously, if there's a known vulnerability and it could easily be exploited and we're not doing anything about it, right, that's risk. And if we can use AI to, automate those simulations, automate that patching, we can reduce that risk in a truly automated way. And really that continuous posture management too. I think, there's a lot of user error that happens too, especially with cloud, but also just within our normal networks, right? I started my career in firewalls, and, I remember a Department of Defense, some guy who didn't really know firewalls, somebody needed something, he added an allow all rule bidirectional at the top of the firewall list. Like, humans make mistakes, right? So how can we get more kind of continuously, monitoring, analyzing that stuff so that the SOC can see that immediately before it becomes an issue? Like, hey, someone just added this firewall rule, you are now vulnerable and we could exploit these systems, let's automate that workflow. And maybe we can even send a Slack message to the person who did that saying, hey, why'd you do this? Please undo that, right? These are huge opportunities for us to leverage AI and automation to really evolve. And then just the Cloud Security Operations Center. I mean, I think we're seeing as industry, cloud security, having more of a reference architecture, but the reality is everyone's cloud environments are very different, right? But we need to think about building out a set of tools, people, processes specifically for cloud, or having members of our team specifically for cloud, because this is the future, right? Are we doing code scanning? Are we collecting enough data from the cloud? Do we have visibility into those cloud environments? Because guess what? I don't have the keys to log into AWS or Google or Azure, but I'm on the security team. I need to sure as heck monitor what's there, monitor what's important, monitor what's going on. And I need to understand the cloud as well, right? We can't just have our security teams be like, well, I don't really understand how that works, and so they need to go fix it, I guess. So we need to combine, I think, the people, process, and technology to properly secure our cloud. So how do you want to start your SOC evolution, right? Obviously, I would love people to just go down a transformation path. And I think some organizations might have an opportunity to do this if they've recently been breached, or a new CISO came in who is able to get a bunch of money. But if you are able to go down the path one of transforming, right, I think it's really outlining any CISO, anyone in the SOC, what do we want our SOC of the future to look like, right? What do we want our data platforms to be? How do we want to use AI in our organizations? What processes do we want to automate? Find those bottlenecks. And how do we improve detection and response and make sure that we have the right cloud expertise in our team? So obviously that is more time consuming and costly, but I think will pay huge dividends for any company that can go down that path, because you're just going to be better prepared for future threats, and you're going to have massive efficiency gains, right? You're going to actually see operational improvement within your security team in a very measurable way. But obviously that's not for every company, and I think there's the path too of optimize what you have today, right? Think about the data you have today. Maybe augment your SIEM with another data lake, have a security data lake, right? Figure out how you can build better detection content, or start using AI to help you with that. Start doing some automation. Automate those things that are the biggest bottlenecks today, right? Like, I encourage you to look at all of your processes as a SOC and look at those biggest bottlenecks and figure out if you can just start automating the first one, the biggest bottleneck. Let's just automate that biggest bottleneck today, and then we can move on to the next one, right? We don't have to boil the ocean. We can do this one at a time. I think we're going to have to embrace some newer platforms out there and move to platforms. I don't think it's going to be one platform to rule them all, but make sure that we start adopting technologies that we believe will be able to scale with us, that we believe will be open and be able to be integrated with as we advance AI and automation. And start thinking about the cloud and cloud security and how we roll that stuff out. So I think it's obviously less costly to do the optimize, but I encourage all of you to go back and look for those bottlenecks within your SOC and figure out how you can start building those incremental improvements. And so if we can really focus on fixing what's broken, right, maybe we can start leveraging some things that will help us triage, or help us hunt or investigate, or help us respond, or help us remediate, right? And hopefully free us up to do more kind of proactive, management. This is where I think we can give a better day in the life of a security analyst, right? It's a hard job. There's a lot of burnout because you are constantly fighting fires. It's like being in the healthcare or actually being a firefighter or a police officer. It's a lot of stress, and you're dealing with it every day, all day. And I really believe that if we can, leverage technology in the right way, and we as an industry, can innovate in the right way and execute in the right way, that we really can get to this. And just some final takeaways. I don't think that that future I outlined is that far in the future, right? The advances that we've made in the last few years are incredible, and even not to talk specifically about SentinelOne, but even the things we're doing right now, I've never been more excited about our industry. And seeing that these things that I talked about are in the near future, like the next year or two, these are going to be a reality. I think it's important to think about the right level of autonomy, within your environment. Like I said, a fully autonomous SOC, probably not for everybody. I mentioned in the beginning, we've all seen false positives. AI is not 100%. Do we really trust it to be fully autonomous? No. But what level of autonomy are you willing to accept, right? Are you willing to accept, an autonomous investigation? Probably, right? There's no real risk of seeing the AI go grab a bunch of data, right? Maybe the remediation side you're a little bit more nervous about, but think about, what level of autonomy would work for your organization. The human shift, I've mentioned it a bunch, right? But we need to continue to understand, the security tasks, right? I worry a little bit about humans kind of being, dumbed down, right? It's like, do humans really need to know anything anymore? We can just ask Google or ask AI, ChatGPT, and it'll tell us, right? Because AI is not 100%, we need the humans there to have their intuition, to provide their context, their creativity, their ethics, right, in a meaningful way. And we really need to shift those humans to stop, drinking from that fire hose and to start thinking more strategically, right, of how, we can better defend our environment and how we can, enable the AI and the automation to better assist us. I think we need to move on from new benchmarks. Mean time to detect, mean time to respond are interesting benchmarks, but I think we need to start measuring, speed, expertise, volume, and, like I said, those operational. Let's take a more business-minded approach to this of what are our bottlenecks, what are the operational improvements that we can make, and let's measure those, within our environment. We're going to need to deprecate our SOC tiers. The tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 model, I think, is going to change, right? I think we're going to be able to, with agentic AI, probably, move beyond this kind of like junior, intermediate, advanced, and hopefully, get to a place where, the humans can be really good at leveraging AI. And I think it's actually going to lower the barriers of entry, for this, right? Because it required a lot of skills to be a tier 3 analyst in the past. I think AI will actually make it easier to be a tier 3 analyst in the future. And really just be more strategic, right? Create a vision for, where you want your SOC to go, and build a path, to get there, right? That aligns with your budget, and hopefully you're able to make a case to the board too, with real data points of why these investments are going to, return, value to the organization and reduce risk, et cetera. So with that, I think there are a few more minutes. If you do have a question, please feel free to come up to the mic. Would love to answer some. You want to go up to the mic? Okay. Yeah, these are the slides are available on the RSA site. So yeah, you can download them as a PDF.
Nice present. Thank you for the presentation. So I build SIM, SOAR, and AI for a living, so really enjoyed this. So a couple of questions. So the problem with SIMs, from the way I see it, is that we still think of them as monoliths, whether in the cloud or on-prem, right?
Yeah.
And then the cost to get everything in there, the time complexity to get everything in there, all the data to get it in one central place, one data store, one data lake, is just not feasible, right? So what I'm seeing is this concept of putting a SIM on the edge. Like basically do the pre-processing, the data collection, the correlation, and maybe filtering out the events on the edge, and not really thinking about doing everything in sort of one central place, both from a cost standpoint and a response time standpoint. So I'm kind of curious to see how SentinelOne is approaching, if you're looking at that as a concept. The second part is more philosophical, right? So with all these advancements in AI and sort of taking away the human, the role of the human becoming lesser and lesser,
yeah.
What is the role of all of these security companies, like MDR companies? They already struggle with differentiators. So if the people process technology, the technology is based on AI, and the processes are really not that different from company to company. What is the element of the people element here in the future SOC and the future MDR companies, when future managed security operations, with all of this built into SentinelOne or CrowdStrike or these big vendors have 95% figured out? What does it really mean? What's the competitive differentiator? How do these other managed services vendors evolve? So I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, great, fantastic questions. Yeah, so I guess I'll do the second one first, right? So talking about MDR services and stuff as well. I think the MDR services that help transform your SOC, I think, are going to be the most successful, right? So the ones that help bring in AI automation, to your environments. I know for our service, right, we really see huge value in having them work together, right? Because it's human and AI teaming for the most part, right? So we train the AI on what the humans actually do, and then they help reinforce the model by checking the results, right? And so having those loops, we can just continue to optimize and make the process faster, right? So if our goal is, to improve and optimize and find the bottlenecks and reduce them, it's going to have to be a constant cycle of feedback between the AI and the humans, right? The first question around kind of, do you do more processing at the edge? I totally agree with that, right? I think it's that future of being federated, right? Getting all the data into one centralized place is going to be kind of impossible. But if you can somehow figure out how to keep the data where it is, but pull in either in an automatic way or send in, the important stuff that needs to be fed into, a centralized place. I think we can do more of that, right? So rather than sending like all your, EDR data, or all your network traffic logs or something to a single place, or all your cloud logs, or all your DNS logs, like store those wherever they might live. But can we, pull out the valuable information from that to be able to centralize that data so that AI can interrogate and you access that quickly, but then be able to call back in a federated way to wherever the data actually lives if it needs the details underneath it, right? And I think that's where we can really drive the future.
So you mentioned a lot of opportunities to incorporate more AI and automation within the SOC. I'm curious for you to elaborate more about the risks as well, because you did mention that remediation would be a huge risk to consider, but are there other risks that we need to consider before we start implementing more of these in our platform?
Yeah, and I think we're at time, but I will answer, can I answer real quickly? Okay, yeah.
Just like 1 moment.
Just 1 minute.
Okay, I'll just answer real quick. Yeah, no, I think that there are obviously risks with AI, right? It's not 100% accurate, and that's why, fully autonomous, no humans in the loop is dangerous, right? Because, AI can hallucinate, AI can be wrong, the data that it's operating off can be bad data, right? And so I think that's why we always need kind of a human in the loop still to check the work. But if we can get out of being that black box, we can, where we show our work, it's the AI and the human working together that I think we can get to that 100% accuracy and reduce the risk. Now, there's obviously a lot of other risks around privacy and how data is trained and stuff, but that's a whole nother topic that if you want to talk afterwards, happy to talk to you about. So, thank you.